And that's where I do a lot of my training, even for out-of-town people. And she said that they have all approval from the Nevada County Health. They're going to set 20 tables up in that room, 8 feet apart. And, you know, I think your room is about that same size.
Big, yeah, it's pretty big.
What do you think, Shauna?
I think we could absolutely do a board meeting with the board of directors in the boardroom. I would just be concerned about the public participation. And if we're all there, do we have to open the lobby to the public?
Right.
Just for your consideration to think about.
Yeah, that's what
the executive team was going to discuss that in the next 2 weeks to kind of see what that looks like to provide a recommendation to you guys.
Okay, cool. Cool. You know, maybe we could meet outside in the summer.
Is right there. But before you call the order into session, I just wanted to let you know that's who that is. And I'll be introducing him at a later point.
Great. Thanks, Brian. Okay.
Hi, Tony. It's good to see you. Welcome.
Hi, everyone.
Good evening.
Krista, did you guys open yet?
Well, technically, we never closed. We've been doing curbside service this whole time. So, and we're continuing with the systems that we have set up. So it's still just
Sure.
curbside.
How does curbside wine tasting go?
There's no tasting. That's that. They have to take my.
Oh, come on.
They have to trust me.
Nothing illegal about that.
It's a big leap of faith.
Heck, I'll be right over after the meeting for that.
You just shut your eyes and imagine.
Yeah, there you go. Just send the aromas into the car.
Exactly. I have done some informal tasting in the parking lot with friends.
Steve Gross, welcome.
Oh, that's right.
Thank you. It's good to see you all this evening. Bright-eyed and perhaps bushy-tailed, I don't know, but bright-eyed.
Yeah, I made sure I washed my hands for 20 seconds so I wouldn't infect all of you.
We appreciate that.
And we've got Mike, our CFO. There he is. Poncelay. All right. Okay. Hey, it's 6 o'clock, Steve Gross. Are you ready? Is everyone ready?
Yes, sir.
Ready as ever be.
All right. Okay, it's 6 o'clock. I'd like to call to order the regular meeting of the Truckee Donner Public Utility District. It's Wednesday, May 20th. And Shauna, could we have roll call, please?
Thank you. Director Laliotis,
Here.
Director Ellis,
Here.
Vice President Finn,
Here.
President Bender.
Here.
The minutes will note Joe Aguirre is absent.
Got it. Thank you.
Thank you.
We're going to defer the pledge again. And MDH, do we have any changes to the agenda?
There are no changes.
Great. Thank you. So we on to public input. So I'd like to open it up to public input on any item not on the agenda tonight. Shauna, do we have any public input?
No, sir.
Got it. Thank you.
You're welcome.
All right, director update. Krista, do you have any updates for us tonight?
Just a quickie. It's just good to see everybody. I'm happy that we have the technology to do this. And I best wishes to Joe, who I am missing here. And then just a quick comment about kind of looking forward. I know that we're all very well aware that the immediate future is very foggy and weird, and we don't know what's going on. You know, my kid just got accepted to Davis. We're very excited, but we don't know if she's going to get to go. You know, we don't know if the school's going to open. We don't know so many things. So I just wanted to sort of reiterate keeping sort of the bigger picture and further in the future in mind, and continuing to work towards the sorts of goals that we have as a PUD to do as much as we can to mitigate future disruptions, the disruptions that we know are going to be caused by climate change, and that is being brought into focus on our clean, renewable energy portfolio and the sustainable practices that we as a district are continuing to embrace, and to help smooth out their future ups and downs to the extent that we can in this very uncertain time. So thank you.
Great, thank you. Bob.
Just from what last time I checked, Nevada County had no new cases of COVID-19. So it's been, I think it's been over a week now. So that's a good thing. And I think that's about it.
Great. Thanks, Bob. Tony.
Nothing to add, just glad to see everyone, glad to see some businesses starting to crack open, and people starting to get out there, but also people who are following social distancing, respecting everyone else's space, and wearing masks and trying to do the right thing. So thank you.
Thanks, Tony. Yeah, good comments. I did it with them all. So glad to see everybody, and businesses are opening slowly according to protocols and that next step. So, all right, that's it for director update. So we have item number 7. We have a public hearing for receiving public comments from members of the public regarding adoption of district resolutions 2020-12, 13, 14, and 15. So is there a presentation on this item?
We do have this is CFO Mike Salmon. We do have a presentation.
Great. You know, have we seen the presentation before? I guess we're normally asked that question. Although we want to, want to just concur with the board or staff. Have we seen this before, and do we want to proceed with the presentation?
President Bender, all of these items on the consent calendar are routine in nature. Certainly the consolidated general election, the closeout of the SCADA reliability, and the only one that's unique is the district treasurer, where we're going to put Mike in. We're suggesting that the board put Mike in that position as the district treasurer. But the others are routine in nature.
This was for the, excuse me, the public hearing. The item number.
The public hearing is also fairly routine in nature in that we do it every year.
Yep. Okay.
The presentation is ready. It's, if you'd like for me to share my screen, I can get started with that if the directors would like that.
Yeah, I say let's do it. All right. Thanks, Mike.
Can everyone see the screen?
Yep.
Great. Good evening, President Bender and members of the board. This item 7 is public hearing consideration of adoption of annual electric and water standby charges. Each year, the board is required to adopt resolutions to continue these electric and water standby charges. These standby charges have been assessed on vacant parcels since the mid-70s. The electric standby charge is $10 per parcel for parcels under 1 acre and $20 for parcels 1 acre or larger. The water standby charge is $80 per parcel. This map shows in blue dots, the water only standby charge locations. The red are electric only locations, and the green are water and electric locations. A public hearing this public hearing was advertised with the Truckee Sierra Sun newspaper on May 8th. And there is no recommendation at this time to change the standby charge rates. From a fiscal impact, the total each year is approximately $133,000, the majority of that being in Nevada County. This is a budgeted item. The recommendation this evening is to conduct a public hearing, which we're doing now, and for the board to adopt the following resolutions. Resolution 2020-12, continuing and fixing water standby charges for fiscal year 2020-21. Resolution 2020-13, continuing and fixing electric standby charges for fiscal year 2020-21. Resolution 2020-14, fixing and placing electric and water standby charges on County of Placer tax roll for collection. Resolution 2020-15, requesting collection of electric and water charges on Nevada County tax rolls. With that, I conclude my presentation. If there's any questions, I'm happy to answer them.
Great. Thank you, Mike. So I'd like to formally open the public hearing regarding this item. So as Ian noted, there is a Q&A on Zoom for that. And I'd like to check in with Shauna regarding any emails you may have received, or I am not seeing any Q&A.
Thank you, President Bender. I'm not seeing any Q&A, and there are no emails regarding this item.
Okay, got it. Thank you. So at this time, I'd like to then close the public hearing and open it up for director comments or questions. Is there a, Mike, was there an approval there that I'm on that? That's what the last slide is that we have up, correct? Is that correct?
Correct.
All right. Oh, so we have item number 2. And so we've done 1, conduct a public hearing, and now we have these 4 resolutions to comment on and approve. So Tony, do you have any comments or issues?
Just a quick question, and just for my own education and maybe the board's education, and maybe Steve Gross might need to answer this, but how do these charges, are they intermingled with a Prop 218, or are they completely separate?
New or increased standby charges would have to go, would have to comply with Prop 218 and go through the mandated process of Prop 218. However, all of these charges, all of these standby charges were adopted prior to 218, and none of the charges are being increased now. So we are not required to go through a Prop 218 process. I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, no, that does. Thank you. So I guess my next question might be for Michael or Mike, is when we did our last cost of service analysis, were standby charges included in that analysis?
Yes, they were. We anticipated having the revenue from these charges throughout all of our analyses and budgets.
Okay, all right. So in theory, they are part of the cost of service analysis, and the reason they're not specifically called out in 218 is because we're not increasing them or proposing to change them. Okay, so no, I was just trying to get my head around exactly how this process is intertwined with rates and Prop 218. So thanks for the discussion.
Thanks, Tony. Bob?
No, I don't have any questions about this. It's pretty simple.
Got it. All right, Krista.
I also have no comment. I'm satisfied with the current moment.
So is there a motion?
I'll move staff's recommendation to adopt resolutions 2020-12, 13, 14, and 15.
I'll second that.
Great. A motion by Tony, second by Bob. Shauna, could we have roll call, please?
Yes, thank you. Director Laliotis,
Yes.
Director Ellis,
Yes.
Vice President Finn,
Yes.
President Bender.
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Okay. So we have 4 consent items tonight on the consent calendar. I'd like to open up that to public comment. Is there any public comment on the consent calendar tonight?
No, sir, there's no questions in the Zoom area or emails.
Great. Thanks, Shauna. Are there any board comments or questions? Krista, we can start with you on the consent.
I am fine with the consent. I have no.
Nice. Bob?
No, I'm fine with everything.
Tony?
I'd like to congratulate Mike on his new position.
Thank you.
No comments.
Yeah.
And ditto. Congratulations, Mike, for appointing yourself treasurer.
Somebody had to do it.
Okay, so there we are. Is there a motion to approve the consent calendar tonight? 4 items.
I'll make a motion to approve the consent calendar.
I'll second that motion.
All right, motion by Bob, second by Krista. Shauna, roll call, please.
Thank you, Director Laliotis,
Yes.
Director Ellis,
Yes.
Vice President Finn,
Yes.
President Bender.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, that takes us to our first action item tonight. Item number 12, consideration of the letter of referral submitted by Ibew 1245 regarding a grievance per the Memorandum of Understanding with Ibew 1245, MOU. And that, I believe, is going to Brian.
Yes, thank you. Good evening, President Bender, member of the board. I wanted to just start off, preface this with, we are working on Zoom here, and I apologize in advance if there's any technology glitches in terms of the audio. Feel free to wave your hand or ask me to stop, and I'll kind of step back a couple of steps. There's a lot of slides here with some introductory background information and some follow-up. And so I think for the interest of efficiency, if you allow me to go through the slides, I can always go back and answer any clarifying questions, because some of the questions you may have will be clarified in the following subsequent slides. I'm going to share my screen here. Okay, as President Bender introduced, this is item number 12. The district's employees generally fall within two categories in terms of negotiations of compensation and benefits: represented or union group, and the unrepresented. This includes management, engineering, and technical staff. The represented group is represented by the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, also known as IBEW, Local 1245. The district and IBEW have maintained a Memorandum of Understanding, an MOU, since January 1st of 1967. The previous MOU became effective in January of 2016 and recently expired on December 31st of last year. In November and December of last year, the district and IBEW negotiated the terms of a new MOU to be effective January 1st, 2020 and expire on December 31st, 2024. So the MOU that was agreed upon was a 5-year agreement. On December 12th of last year, the district and IBEW arrived at a tentative agreement, also known as a TA, on all proposed modifications pending ratification by vote from the IBEW membership and board approval for adoption. In the interest of honoring the tentative agreement, all of the new provisions within the MOU were implemented and made effective on January 1st of this year, recognizing that it was still pending board approval and adoption. On February 5th, the district received a grievance submitted by IBEW for failure to uphold the terms of the MOU, specifically the terms outlined in Title 19, titled Employee Benefit Program. The grievance revealed a material difference between the district and IBEW's regarding the applicability of the MOU to previously retired employees with the district, or of the district. District staff holds the position that negotiations of compensation and benefits were negotiated on behalf of the bargaining unit, which are current employees. I didn't know if District Counsel, Mr. Gross, wanted to provide a little insight on the definition of a bargaining unit, but we have reviewed this with District Counsel and he is in agreement. Mr. Gross?
The bargaining unit is defined in the MOU as certain classes of employees within the district. So it's quite clear from my perspective, and I believe staffs and our special labor council, that the labor unit, or I'm sorry, the bargaining unit is precisely defined within the MOU, and there's no question as to which employees or which positions it covers and which it does not. Okay, Brian?
Thank you. So as staff and district council pointed out, IBEW 1245 represents the bargaining unit, which is the classification of current employees. The bargaining unit does not include former employees or former retired employees. So therefore, district staff had no expectation or reasonable basis upon which to believe these negotiations with IBEW included compensation and benefits for anyone other than those persons who are members of the bargaining unit. And I'd like to point out that during this process, no documentation of either parties supports anything otherwise. On February 20th, the district and IBEW 1245 held an informal meeting to discuss the differences in interpretation of the MOU, as I mentioned, Title 19, addressing benefits. During this informal meeting, myself, the general manager, Mr. Hawley, IBEW business representative, Mike Venturino, and business manager, Al Fortier, met to discuss the difference in interpretation. Neither party conceded its position. Subsequent to that meeting, on or about February 25th, a second informal meeting was held between the district and IBEW with the intent of finding resolution of this disputed item. In attendance of this meeting was essentially the district's negotiating team, outside third-party labor counsel, Joe Wiley, Joe Horvath, the electric utility director, myself, the water utility director, and IBEW representatives Mike Venturino and Al Fortier. During this discussion, both parties agreed the disputed item should not delay the approval or adoption of the new MOU by the board. So we recognize that in totality, the MOU required approval by the board, but this particular disputed item should not delay the timely approval of it. So both parties agreed that advisory arbitration, as provided and described in the MOU Title 14, which is the grievance procedures, would be the most appropriate means for seeking resolution. In this discussion, there were some alternatives that were discussed in terms of other resolutions, but both parties agreed that the most appropriate would be advisory arbitration. At that meeting, out of that meeting, the results of that meeting, both parties agreed to execute a side letter agreement. This agreement, the context of it, or the text of this agreement, the intent of the agreement was that both parties agreed to resolve their differences without further meet and confer, and by allowing the board to adopt the proposed MOU without either party waiving its respective position on the disputed issue. This letter essentially allowed both parties to continue, present to the board for approval, and resolve the disputed item at a later date. On March 18th of this year, the board approved the MOU, also acknowledging the side letter agreement. On April 14th, the district received a second grievance submitted by IBEW. This grievance was substantially similar to the first grievance received on February 5th. And I must point out that the original grievance that was submitted and received by the district on February 5th was withdrawn by IBEW prior to the side letter agreement meeting. As pointed out in the letter of referral submitted to the board that we will touch on in a little bit. On April 15th, the district responded to this grievance that was submitted on April 14th. In the response letter, district pointed out that the position of the district on the disputed item had not changed, and both parties had agreed to advisory arbitration. On May 5th of this year, IBEW submitted a letter of referral to the board for consideration of the grievance submitted on April 14th. Specifically, the grievance was MOU Title 14, or this letter of, I apologize, this letter of referral is in accordance with step 3 of the MOU Title 14 grievance procedures. The letter of referral was submitted the day before the regularly scheduled board meeting for May 6th. This did not give staff or the district time to agendize the meeting for board consideration, since the agenda for that meeting had already been published. And because of this, the board will not have the opportunity to consider the item within the 10-day limit prescribed in the MOU. So one of the provisions within Title 14 is that the board must respond to the letter of referral within 10 days of the next regularly scheduled board meeting. Because of the timing of the submittal, that couldn't be accomplished. Wanted to point out some inaccuracies within the letter of referral. There's a few in terms of timelines and specific discussions, but most significantly, there's an inaccuracy in paragraph 5 of the letter that includes an inaccurate recount of the informal meeting held on February 20th. In the letter of referral, business representative Mike Venturino indicates that Mr. Hawley conveyed in confidence that the cancellation of payment to current retirees was due to outside pressure from unrepresented retirees. This statement is entirely inaccurate. I was in attendance with that meeting, as I mentioned in the onset. In that meeting was myself, Mr. Hawley, business rep Mike Venturino, and business manager Al Fortier. What staff did discuss with the IBEW representative was to inform them that staff had mistakenly, at the beginning of the year, January 20th, in an effort to implement all the agreed upon provisions within the new MOU, things such as pay increases, cost of living, general wage increase, some of the opt-out compensations, where the intent was to implement those on January 20th. Staff mistakenly also included increases in the post-retirement benefits. And once staff identified that mistake, it was immediately corrected. Staff also advised IBEW during this informal meeting that we believe that an unrepresented retiree was coordinating with represented retirees, formerly represented retirees, and they were coordinating a protest that had no standing. Subsequent to the letter of referral submitted to the board, staff notified IBEW that in order for the submitted letter of referral to be considered by the board in open session, the district would require a waiver of the 10-day response requirement in writing. IBEW has provided that written waiver. It has been included as an attachment to the board packet. And the district's, it has been attached with your board staff report. Couple of options for the board to consider this evening. Line these out as two options. Obviously, there may be more, but these are the two primary options for consideration. First option would be to reject the grievance submitted by IBEW on April 14th. If that were to occur, then IBEW would have the option to submit for a non-binding advisory arbitration within the next 20 days, and this would be in accordance with Step 4 of Title 14 of the MOU. If that were to occur, then the arbitrator shall then provide a written recommendation to the board. And finally, the board would make a final decision in writing within 10 days of the submitted recommendation. Second option would be to accept the grievance submitted by IBEW as valid, thereby affirming the position that the IBEW represents past employees of the district. And then subsequent to that, staff could be directed to increase the district's post-retirement benefit contributions to existing retirees in an amount consistent with those negotiated by the current bargaining unit. This would include all retirees. Before considering those options, there's quite a few contributing factors that staff would ask the board to consider prior to that action. The first is the nature of compensation and benefits. They are clearly a extremely important and critical recruitment and retention tool for the district. The negotiation of improved benefits and compensation retain our high-performing employees we have on staff now and offer recruitment incentives to acquire new high-performing employees as our current employees retire. Another thing for consideration is that retirees, both unrepresented and represented formally, aren't represented at the negotiating table. For instance, if during this negotiations, IBEW and the district determined it necessary to reduce a post-retirement benefit, that too would not be applicable to the existing retirees as they retired under the contract that was valid at the time of their retirement. And so their representation is not at the negotiating table, regardless if it's an increase or decrease in benefit. And then negotiating terms of an MOU or other agreements. At the negotiating table, staff, the district, the representatives of IBEW are negotiating a package of benefits and compensation. This includes compromises on behalf of both parties. For example, if the IBEW representatives are seeking an increase in salaries, 0.5%, 1%. the way the negotiations work is there's compromises to that because there's a financial component to the entire package. There's a cost associated with the entire package. And so terms that have economic benefit, medical or retirement benefits, or cost containments are part of a larger package that's negotiated with current employees. A relevant specific example in the most recent negotiations where, as we're discussing this evening, an increase in post-retirement medical benefit. Also in that package was an agreement that current employees would begin to pay monthly dues to reduce the cost of the group medical insurance. So in essence, they're contributing on the front end to group medical insurance, knowing that their current MOU provides them an increase in their monthly cap upon retirement. Previously retired employees, whether represented or unrepresented, aren't privy to that negotiation or those terms. So it's not appropriate that it be applicable to them. In the letter of referral, the IBEW references mutual intent during negotiations. It's the district's position, staff's position, confirmed and verified with both district council and the labor council used in negotiation, that the mutual intent during negotiations is between the district representatives and the bargaining unit. As we discussed earlier in this presentation, the bargaining unit is representative of current employees. This brings the question out: are other parties of interest outside of the district and the bargaining unit, are they represented during negotiating or at the negotiating table? Entities or interest or parties such as past employees, past retirees, represented and unrepresented retirees, or all of the above. Staff's position, the district's position, is that parties outside of the bargaining unit and outside of the district employment are not represented here. Another factor for consideration, specific language within Title 14 of the MOU outlined under grievance procedures. The employee or an employee organization official, if desired by the employee, shall reduce the issue to writing and refer the matter to the general manager of the district within 20 working days after the facts or circumstances giving rise to the grievance are available to the employee. Here we see language that the grievance procedure is on behalf of employees who are represented by an employee organization. Another note is during the negotiation process, the district's negotiating team, as I mentioned earlier, myself, Joe Horvath, and Joe Wiley, were given parameters by the board from which to negotiate within. And these included increases in post-retirement benefit contribution in exchange for cost containment measures. These cost containment measures are the employee contributions, monthly contributions beginning in 2021 at $25 a month and increasing to $50 a month in 2023. Neither of these provisions were ever intended to be applicable to previous retirees. In fact, the cost containment would be, operationally, mechanically impossible to apply to past employees. The assertion by IBEW, as stated in the letter, that it was the parties' mutual intent at the bargaining table, again, is not supported by either party's documentation. Wanted to outline for you some potential fiscal impacts for consideration this evening. First, the fiscal impact would be if the grievance is rejected. If the grievance were to be rejected, there will be no direct fiscal impact associated with this item this evening. The district, however, would be subject to share the expense of advisory arbitration should the IBEW pursue that option as outlined in the MOU. At present time, the actual cost associated with that arbitration is unknown to staff, but we could come back to the board with that. If the grievance were to be accepted as valid, there would be an increase in monthly contributions to post-retirement medical benefits. Those negotiated between the district and the bargaining unit will be applied to all existing previous retirees. The estimated annual increase associated with that would be approximately $91,000 a year. That doesn't include any other administrative costs associated with that item. and to note that it wasn't included in either the budget, fiscal year 2021 budget, or in the consideration of the overall cost of the benefits package negotiated between the district and IBEW back in November and December. So staff recommendation this evening is number 1, to reject the grievance submitted by IBEW 1245 on April 14th of 2020. And then 2, direct staff to coordinate advisory arbitration pending written requests by IBEW 1245. And I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
Brian, thank you. Very in-depth. Really appreciate it. Okay, Shauna, so I'd like to open this item up to public comment. I know we've had several emailed in letters and comments regarding this. I'm also looking down at the Q&A down there, and there is no items in there.
Yes, Mr. President. We have received public comment. Some requested that their comments be read into the record, but the board has received all of these comments for consideration and preparation for the meeting. For this particular item today, we received public comment from Barbara Cahill, Rosanna Matlock, and Becky Mazer. As you recall, back in April, we received public comment from Jim Wilson, Karen Dixon, Barbara Cahill, Becky Mazer, Steve Hollabaugh, Chris Browers, Sue Camara, Sam Aubrey, Jack Johnson, Ralph Ekron, Mike McGovern, Bob Springer, and Peter Holtzmeister, representing a group of Ron Reynolds, Joe Straub, Mary Chapman, and Ed Taylor. That again was a separate item, but connected.
Got it. Thank you. And I would like to note, did you mention Ralph Erkelin?
Yes, sir.
Sorry if I didn't pronounce this. Okay, got it. I just looking at my emails on some recent ones. Got it. I think you got them all.
Note all those names.
Excellent. Thank you. Okay. Yeah, tough item here. So Brian, again, I want to say thanks again for the detailed presentation and slides. We've been hearing a lot about this lately, and I don't want to be insensitive to anyone here. You know, costs are going up, insurance costs, etc., and everybody, you know, wants to fight for their rights for that. So I want to thank everyone for their public comments, their emails. And I'd like to just reiterate to the board before I open it up for director comments and questions that we focus on the process, the procedure here, and looking at you know, our current district code, what is in that code, which Brian has so thoroughly presented to us, and make that determination, you know, does this follow that policy, and rather than getting into the details of the specific request, which I, you know, again, don't want to be insensitive to, but in the future, it could be significantly many other items that are being requested, if, you know, depending on our decision tonight. So with that said, I'd like to bring in some director discussion and comment. Krista, do you have any thoughts at the moment?
Sure. I do think that was a great and thorough presentation. It very much echoes my memory of this arc. We have been involved in this negotiation since November. We have received updates every single board meeting since then, I think mid-November, December, January, February. Staff has been very clear in asking for our direction and our input, which we gave. I trust my staff. I trust them to know the law and to negotiate in a principled way, and to convey those results openly to the board, which they did. and to take our direction, which they also did. I can speak, you know, in my memory of this, it was never my intent to, the negotiations included people who were not employed with us. I only was focusing on moving forward. So it never even occurred to me that we could be discussing other groups, staff in this report sort of echoes that. And yeah, that's just a can of worms that I'm not willing to open. Our precedent is that we are negotiating with a specific bargaining unit. And I do sympathize with people in this moment of uncertainty, but it's uncertain for the district too right now. And I feel that that's not an inconsiderable amount of money. And I am inclined to let this play itself out again in the procedural, you know, there is some procedural complexity here, but the next step is to go to arbitration, and I am inclined to let it play out that way.
Great,
Thank
thank you, Krista. All right, it looks like we do have a Q&A from Mike Venturino request in here. So even though I closed public comment, this is our Zoom meeting, so I would like to include him in that. So I guess this is a question. He's indicating that he can't do the video. So what was our intent here, Steve? Or I guess it's kind of a question.
We were using public comment via email and the questions and answers. Ian did call for public comment through the Q&A. And you called for it, and I just asked Mr. Venturino what his public comment was. I'm awaiting his answer.
Oh, he's just posting. I can see the video and hear the video, but apparently he cannot be heard. So, yeah, with the Zoom meeting, we're doing our video here. So I guess maybe he was expecting to be able to voice rather than type out his comments.
We did release on the website ways to clear expectations of public comment through Zoom meetings.
Okay. Steve, I just want to, do you have any, I just want to make sure we're following the right procedures for public comment and stuff.
Sure. So first, I would note that the union was informed that it could submit additional supporting materials in support of its position if it wanted to, and if it wanted to do that and have those materials included in the meeting packet, it needed to submit those by the 13th. The union did get that that message. The district has not received any additional supporting materials. With respect to public comment, I believe since Mr. Venturino has expressed in writing that he's unable to be heard, he could submit his comments right now in writing to us.
Oh, okay. And it looks like he just posted, I would ask the board review my submission to Brian. So Brian, did he submit something additional to you just now? Or I'm assuming, or I would guess it's in our current board packet, or maybe there's something else.
That is correct, President Bender. In the staff report, there is an attachment. IBEW, through Mr. Venturino's submission, submitted an excerpt of the Title 19 medical benefits with highlighted yellow section.
Okay, and I'm trying to flip to that page, and I was having a little iPad technical difficulties. Okay. Got it. All right, so wait, could you briefly repeat that again? Sorry, Brian, the iPad glitch of the meeting packet.
Absolutely. I'm pulling up the attachment. Just okay. There is a submission or submittal from IBEW. It is a subsection of the benefits package in the MOU. It is a section that reads under subpart number 6, should the district change the insurance plans or coverage through the collective bargaining process, those will apply to retirees also.
Got it. Okay. Thank you, Brian. Okay. All right. I think we're covered in that regard. So I'd like to ask Tony, do you have any additional comments, questions?
Sorry, just trying to get my screen to go back to unmute. I don't have too much to add. Thanks, Jeff and Krista. And yes, I did review the item 6 in the health benefits that Mr. Venturino was requesting that we review. And certainly it's not clear that the benefit itself is included different from insurance plans or coverage. So, at this point in time, I believe, the board was under the understanding this whole time that of what the package that was being negotiated for included. And so, to continue on this process and reject the grievance and let it play out per Title 14, which is exactly what the side letter agreed to, should be the preferred process for me, at least.
Okay. Thank you, Tony. Bob.
Okay, got to unmute there. Yeah, I pretty much agree with Krista and Tony and yourself and Jeff. Only question I have is, there any other districts, including retirees, when they're negotiating with their current employees? Is there any history with other districts doing that? I don't know. Steve, are you aware of that? Or Brian, are you aware? Or Michael?
I'm going to go get Anthony.
I can start an introduction, and I'll touch the topic and then allow Steve Gross and Michael to expand on it. It would be speculation on my part. If district council wants to expand, it's not prohibited under law to include, but it has to be explicitly outlined and agreed upon by both parties, and in which this case it wasn't. I can't speculate on other districts or other agencies.
This is Steve. In my experience, that's not something that I see. I don't see it happening right now with other employers and other bargaining representatives on behalf of bargaining units. Brian's statement is an accurate one. It's possible that the parties could agree to that, but there would need to be a very clear express understanding that that's what they were doing, and not some sort of implied understanding, because absent some sort of very clear understanding, the union only represents the bargaining unit. So to answer your question, I'm not aware that that is a common practice at all, and I don't see it.
Michael, are you aware of any districts?
I have heard that it has happened, but I'm not aware of any.
Okay.
And the current trend right now in the industry is not to include not to be expanding retiree benefits, especially for existing retirees, but rather trying to control costs.
Okay, thank you. My other question is, what exactly did the retirees receive in January that was retracted? I was just curious. Was that a medical benefit or a cash payment or what?
Brian, if you could respond.
I'm sorry, it broke up a little bit. Sorry, Director Ellis. Can you repeat the question?
Yes. What monetary benefit or health benefit did the retirees receive in January, which you retracted when you found the error?
Oh, okay. So I don't have all the specific, line by line benefits that were increased for each retiree, but essentially what happened was the agreed upon increase in monthly post-retirement medical benefit contributions was applied to existing retirees in error. Once it was identified, it was a letter was issued by the district identifying the mistake and the error, informing each of these retirees that the district would not be requesting the money be refunded, but moving forward, it would be reverted back to their prior monthly post-retirement medical benefit cap. And so depending on the qualified or what their qualifications were for each month, they temporarily received that 1 month increase in error, and then it was reverted back to what it should have been.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have for right now.
Great, thanks, Bob. Good questions. Okay, Brian, just kind of one interesting question. Are there women members of the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers? Just an equal pay, equal rights question there for you.
There are many hardworking, valuable, and critical employees within the IBEW that are female.
Thank you very much. That's good to hear. Maybe they should consider changing their name. But anyways.
President Bender?
Yes.
If I may, I see in the Q&A section that Mr. Venturino has submitted some additional comments, and I think they should be read for the record, and perhaps, tell Mr. Venturino that we will read those, and we won't continue to keep the public comment section open, but if he's got any final comments, to jot them down quickly before Shauna reads the additional comments that he provided.
Okay, great. Steve, thank you very much. I really appreciate the clarification there. I was wondering what to Michael's comments there. So we'll kind of pause for a moment to let, it looks like Michael did. There we go. He said, thank you. All right. Thank you, Michael, for writing all that out. So Shauna, do you want to go ahead with that, or I'm more than happy to?
Mr. Bender, I'll be happy to do that.
Awesome. Thank you.
Mr. Venturino says, I would ask the board review my submission to Brian. In the board packet, there should have been a submission. I can type, but it will take several minutes as I do not type quickly. The highlighted section is very clear and ambiguous. Sorry, highlighted. The increase was a change in coverage and will apply to retirees. The side letter only stipulates that Title 14 would be followed, not go straight to arbitration as suggested by Mr. Wright. Retirees are permissive subjects of bargaining, and without specifically excluding them from bargaining, they would then be included. Why then are current retirees being paid as per the most current MOU? A resolution that is favorable to both the union and the district is proposed in the last paragraph of the letter of referral. It is fair and reasonable and limits the district's liability going forward. Please read. Thank you, Mr. Gross. And I was not aware I would not be able to speak. Speak is what I think he's tried to say.
Yes.
So you may formally close the public comment section now unless there's any other comments that Sean has received. I know you've already done that once, but since you've reopened it for Mr. Venturino, we might just make sure there's no other comments.
There are no further comments at this time in email or in questions and answers.
Great. Steve, thank you very much. I'd like to close now public comment. We've read those into the record. Let's see, I'm just taking a look at my notes here. And I think we've heard from all the directors regarding their thoughts, comments. I kicked that off. Are there any other comments, questions from the board? And if not, is there a motion on this item?
Yeah, I just have one question of Steve. This is Tony. Is it your opinion that we are following Title 14 currently in this process, the grievance procedure process?
Yes, we're properly following the MOU. There certainly is an issue with respect to standing, whether or not the union has standing to bring forward a grievance on behalf of retirees because they are not an employee who has brought forward the grievance or requested the union to bring forward a grievance. So there's a question on standing, but otherwise we are following the process set forth in the MOU for responding to this letter of referral.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Tony. Director Finn, Director Ellis, are there any other comments, questions, or a motion?
I don't really have any more questions. Bob and Tony both asked things that I had small questions about. And I just want to assure Mr. Venturino that I did read all of the attachments, the letter that he sent and the areas that he highlighted. And I understand what he's putting out there, but it doesn't really change my thoughts on the matter. I can see how that can be read in two different ways very easily. And the way that we intended it to be read was for retirees going forward. And that it doesn't change my anything. But I did read it as I read all of the letters that came to us. So that's.
All right, thank you. Bob, round two. You have a motion? Questions? Oh, you're muted.
Okay. Yeah, I also read all the information that was provided in regards to this subject. And also, when we were going through the negotiation process in November and December, I was under the impression it was for current employees. I mean, and if that's something we want to discuss in the future with past, with retired employees, and then maybe that's something we should do, you know, if they're really struggling. So anyway, I'll let somebody else make a motion.
Brian, could you, I'm just flicking through the packet here and, oh, there, I think it's, yeah, just item 5, page, gosh, my iPad, the 33 of our packet. Mm-hmm. Oh, there we are. Thank you, Brian. Okay.
Okay. Well, I'll make a motion that we accept staff's recommendation to reject the grievance submitted by Ibew 1245 on April 14th, 2020.
All right, we have a motion. Is there a second? I'll second. Move too quickly. Sorry, Tony. All right. Bob, excuse me, Krista motioned. I seconded. Shauna, could we have roll call, please?
Thank you. Director Laliotis,
Yes.
Director Ellis,
Yes.
Vice President Finn,
Yes.
President Bender.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Steve, do we need, Krista, wow, my brain with this Zoom, it's not, did you read line item 2 there of that with the motion? You're muted.
I just read the staff recommendation.
Got it.
I did not read.
Steve, do we need to include item number 2 in the motion?
As long as we're talking about it, if you want to clarify that that was the intent to include that in the motion, we could do so, just for clarity of the record here.
You know what? And I can't even find, oh, it's behind my, there we go. Okay, number 2, then I move that we also direct staff to coordinate advisory arbitration pending written request by IBEW 1245.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Krista's motion has been modified. My second still stands. And Shauna, why don't we just do roll call again and to be clear?
Yes, sir. Director Laliotis,
Yes.
Director Ellis,
Yes.
Vice President Finn,
Yes.
President Bender.
Yes.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you. All right. Good. As we move through the Zoom meeting, sorry about any technical difficulties. And moving through, I am going back to my agenda on the iPad. So we have action item number 13, consideration of a contract to perform the water meter radio transmitter replacement project. Please go ahead.
Good evening again. You have me for a few items here. As President Bender alluded to, this is action item number 13. So if you recall, back in September of 2008, you wouldn't recall unless you were on the board here. I'm sorry, I apologize. In September of 2008, the district awarded a contract for the provision of an automated meter reading system. This was to cover all the potable water system customers here in the district. The water meters that were procured were manufactured by Neptune, and the radios accompanying those were an assembly of a radio system and software by Aclara. The radio system itself consists of 3 major components: the meter transmitter unit, the MTU, the distributed collection units, which are referred to as DCUs, and the network control computer, or otherwise known as the NCC. Here's an image of what we'll be discussing this evening. On the right side of that image, the gray box with the Aclara emblem, that is the MTU. You can see the wiring there attaches it to the Neptune meter. Water registered through that meter is conveyed to the radio unit there, and then transmitted out to the DCUs that are strategically placed across the district to collect information and then ultimately send it back to the district. The gray MTU that you see there in the picture is what we will be referring to in this action item. So as I mentioned, each meter is equipped with an MTU. The first generation MTU, the ones we originally procured in 2008 and 2009, generated readings every 6 hours. More recently, Aclara has come up with new versions. A more updated version of the MTU provides hourly readings. And staff, the district has, I believe, beginning in 2015, began acquiring this updated version. We didn't go through a wholesale replacement of all 13,000 MTUs across the system. It didn't seem financially or logistically efficient. So we use those updated MTUs for new construction and maintenance or replacement of damaged MTUs. You saw the MTU, the gray box. It is battery powered. There is no other alternative source for that. It's battery powered and factory sealed. So when the battery fails, the entire unit must be replaced. You can't simply just replace it. Those MTUs report out to 27 DCUs located throughout the district. They store data and then transmit it to the district office. We prefer to use district-owned facilities to install these DCUs, such as tanks, wells, pump stations, and even district-owned utility poles. And then finally, the NCC is located here at the district office. This is, for lack of a better term, the database or brain of the system. It receives the meter reading data, it stores it, and then it becomes available for all the various functions that we use that information for at the district. That could be operational troubleshooting, leakage, things of that nature, billing, customer service calls, and use the data for finance, for budget generation and projections. As you can recall in previous board workshops, the large number of MTU failures created some issues with billing. And so this action item this evening, as we'll get into in the details here in a few minutes, will significantly aid or assist the district's billing system in having real-time, accurate, and efficient billing process. As I mentioned, the great majority of the MTUs were installed back in 2009 and 2010 with the original deployment of our automated meter reading system. This was a huge advantage for the district in terms of meter reading, considering the deep snow and winter environment we have here. Manually reading meters is very challenging. MTUs have a 20-year battery warranty from the manufacturer. That's from Aclara. It is a prorated warranty. We've discussed this before in previous board items, but I'll review it real quickly. The MTU that fails in the first 10 year is replaced by Aclara full cost, no cost to the district. And then it's prorated from the out years, year 11 to year 20. There's a prorated cost of replacement. It begins at 50% and then is prorated incrementally at 5% a year. So essentially, there's full replacement up to year 10, year 11. There's a 50% and a year 12, 55% cost to the district. The one thing of note is the warranty does not cover labor for the replacement of the MTU. So we do receive the shipment, but it's up to district resources to facilitate the replacement. So a significant number of MTU failures have occurred over the past 2, I would even stretch it out to 3 years. And so some speculation, but we have pretty good evidence that the extreme temperature variations, in particular the really cold environment in the winter, has contributed to that. Batteries don't tend to do well in extreme cold or extreme heat. And then there's obviously some overly optimistic projections by the manufacturer on the battery life of those original Series 500 Aclara MTUs. And then also, even the batteries that are just weak, they haven't completely failed, they typically stop functioning during the winter. And sometimes once the warm weather comes back, they'll begin functioning again for a short period of time, but then eventually die shortly thereafter. At the July 17th board meeting last year, we did have a discussion, an open session regarding the significant number of MTU failures. Again, we talked about the potential causes of that. At the time of that discussion, the numbers were estimated around 3,100 MTUs across the district. All of those were within that first 10-year full replacement warranty. We did contract out for field installation a third-party contractor that was awarded to Concord Utility Services, and that work within that bid package was completed in November of last year. It was also noted at the time during that July meeting that staff did suspect additional failures over the winter, and we suspected that those would in large part be the remaining units of that original installation back in 2008 through 2010. Excuse me. At the April 15th board meeting this year, we did have a preliminary discussion about the MTU failures. At that time, there was an additional 3,400, just over 3,400 MTUs that were in need of immediate replacement. And staff recommended that in addition to the ones that were already failed, that the district pursue replacing all of the original remaining MTUs. So anything that was still left in the field in operation that was procured in that original deployment would be included in this project. At that time, the board authorized an expenditure of up to $240,000 to purchase all of these MTU replacements. And we did note at the time that we would come back to the board, as we are this evening, for a contractor to do these MTU replacements. We do need a third-party contractor. We recognizing that we have a short window of construction opportunity here in Truckee, basically the late spring to early fall. And with the sheer numbers of MTUs to be replaced, we don't have the inside resources to do that. In April of this year, a bid request was issued. It was advertised in the Sierra Sun. We held a bid opening on May 11th, and the district received 3 bids. I've outlined those here in the chart below. Oh, there is an asterisk next to the responsiveness of Concord Utilities that I'd like to go over real quickly. Concord Utility Services did not acknowledge addendum number 1 on the bid forms. Addendum number 1 addressed the addition of a Class B contractor's license as an eligible bidder. So it added that additional qualification. The issue was reviewed by staff and district council and determined to not have material impact on the bid by Concord Utility. It didn't present any material advantage in the bidding process. So under staff recommendation and legal counsel review, to consider this as a minor irregularity and waived. The bid price submitted by Concord Utilities was just over $318,000. Staff will be recommending a 10% change order allowance. And the funding for this will be the Water Department General Fund, and sufficient funds do exist for this project. This evening before you, staff has a recommendation for number 1 to waive the minor irregularity associated with the failure of Concord Utilities Services to acknowledge addendum number 1. And number 2, award the water meter radio replacement 2020 to Concord Utility Services in an amount of $318,729.60 plus a 10% change order allowance for a total authorization not to exceed $350,600. And I'd be happy to answer any questions you might have.
Great, thank you, Brian. All right, I'd like to open this item up for public comment. Shauna, I'm not seeing anything in the Q&A regarding this item. Is there anything else you have?
No, sir, there's nothing in email form either.
Got it, thank you. All right, I'd like to close public comment on this action item and open it up for director comments and questions. Krista, do you have anything?
Let's see, nothing major. That minor irregularity, clearly they have the Class B license that is necessary to perform this work, as they've already done the work for us last summer and fall. So they just didn't acknowledge receipt of that addendum. Is that correct?
This was to acknowledge. So the addendum is for all parties to acknowledge and submit with their bid. This doesn't mean that Concord didn't have the right construction license. It just means that this was added as a provision by the district as an oversight. And so an addendum is placed there to include a wider range of bidders, and all parties must acknowledge that that addendum was included with the bid. Unfortunately, Concord didn't include that with the bid, and that was, it can happen from time to time, and it's been reviewed with legal counsel as a minor irregularity. It didn't provide any material advantage to Concord in the bidding process.
Okay. My next question is about the MTUs themselves. So going forward, obviously we have to replace them and get this work finished, and this will cover all of the original batch that were installed in 2009, 2010, and here we are in 2020. Do these new meters have a similar life expectancy? Is that what the manufacturer is saying? And should we just in our minds know that we're probably going to replace them in 10 years instead of 20 years? Or are they better?
Great question. Great question, Director Finn. We have staff, myself and our district engineer for the water department have met at length with Aclara to resolve this issue. We have confirmed with Aclara that the new MTU we are procuring is a new version with an improved battery. They've assured us that the battery technology has improved, and the battery life is intended to much more closely and accurately reflect the warranty. So the projected life is 20 years on this battery. It's a different battery than the original series that we bought in 2008 and 2009. We also negotiated a reduced cost to move forward, a per unit reduced cost of these MTUs that weren't covered by warranty yet because they hadn't failed, but we expect they will. So we did staff work and negotiated a reduced cost to ensure that we're replacing all of the original deployment and we won't have these issues in the future.
Fingers crossed.
Absolutely.
Great. Thank you. That's it for me.
Thank you. Bob?
Yeah, my only question is, what was your estimate of what this would cost in the beginning? I don't remember.
Sorry, I was on mute. We originally projected the actual contract cost to be somewhere in the range of $300,000 to $350,000 based on our past contract. This is more MTU units. And so we just did that math there. We were expecting anywhere between $300,000 and $350,000.
So you're pretty close on that. Okay. I would, for some reason, I was thinking 240,000, but that was a number that was shown earlier, I guess. Okay.
Yeah, that was the cost of the purchase of the MTUs.
Oh, okay. So basically, this is a $500,000 project.
In total, that's not including some also associated staff time, programming things on the back end and billing and customer service.
And this is replacing all 13,000.
No, this is replacing in total the approximately 4,000. I think I have 4,700 MTUs. That not all 13,000 current MTUs are the old version. We've been since 2015 installing a newer version.
Okay, got it. Thank you. That's all I got.
At the end of this project, over the last 2 years, we will have replaced close to or approximately 7,000 MTUs over the last 2 years.
Thanks, Bob. Tony?
No, all good questions. And thanks for the other board members for asking them. I just want to point out, and I want to, let staff know I appreciate them pushing these projects forward. As a utility director myself, I know how frustrating it can be, not only for the utility to be blind on all of these meter reads, but also from the customer perspective. Customers are now used to seeing how much water they're using on their water bill or accessing their information on the internet and seeing how much water they're using. So when you have that ability and then you lose it, I know that there's frustration on the customer side as well. So overall, I'm a big supporter of this. And I'm glad we're moving forward. I wish it didn't cost that much, and I wish the batteries lasted closer to the expected lifespan of 20 years, but that's just the way it goes. So I'm in support, and thank you, Brian and staff.
Great. Thank you, everyone. I don't have any other further questions. Really great clarification on this item. So I think if there's someone ready for a motion.
I'll make a motion. Move to waive the minor, let's see, is that the recommendation? Yeah. Waive the minor irregularity associated with the failure of Concord Utility Services to acknowledge addendum number 1 and 2, award the water meter radio replacement 2020 to Concord Utility Services in an amount of $318,729.60, plus a 10% change order allowance for a total authorization not to exceed $350,600.
Thanks, Bob, for the motion.
I'll second that motion.
Thank you, Krista, for the second. Shauna, could we have roll call, please?
Yes, thank you. Director Liliotis,
Yes.
Director Ellis,
Yes.
Vice President Finn,
Yes.
President Bender.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you, Brian. All right. I think we're on item number 14, consideration of award of the tank site piping modifications 2020 construction contract. And you're probably back with us, Brian.
Yes, I am. Let me pull this up for everyone. Okay, thank you, President Bender and members of the board. This is action item number 14. So the water department has an ongoing need to maintain storage tank and pump facilities throughout the district. A pretty sizable number of our storage tanks were constructed in the late 1960s and early 1970s. That makes them about 50 years old. Repairs, seismic upgrades, and new interior coatings are needed in many of these. The pump stations that we have are typically located at the same location or facility as a tank. So our pump stations, the plumbing for these pump stations were constructed at the same time as the tanks. And at some of these sites, there's only one pipe supply going into the storage tank and out. So it's a single inlet outlet pipe infrastructure that allows the booster pumps to pull from the storage of the tank and pump up to the next zone. Staff has identified the need to construct bypass piping to allow for the needed maintenance of these aging tank infrastructures. In order to do that, we need to do some pipe modifications at each of the facilities so the tank could be taken out of service. We could do the necessary maintenance, recoating, repairs inside the tank and not take our customers out of water. We could create basically a bypass pumping network while we do that maintenance. The project that we're considering this evening, the tank site piping modifications 2020 project, also involves some other items. And in addition to the piping modifications, staff intends to construct meter vaults and install conduit at 6 specific locations. The project has 2 main objectives. The one I just mentioned earlier was to install new valving and piping to allow for future maintenance activities without creating any significant loss of water service. And the second one is to install meters at selected pump stations to enhance the district's ability to track water flow and essentially water loss. And this is going to be an important, extremely important kind of ability to do in the future, recognizing that the State Water Resources Control Board is about to publish their new water loss performance standards. The expectation there is that we'll have the final rulings here this summer and implementation later in the fall. And so this project is timely and it puts the district in a far better position to meet the compliance that we are expecting. In order to accomplish this project, district advertised a request for bids back in April. The request for bids was published in the Sierra Sun, and then a bid opening was held on May 11th of this year. District did receive 6 bids. I've outlined those here for you in the graphic. There is a footnote here that the bid from Rapid Construction did not include a debarment certification. This is a component of the bid package. This situation has occurred in the past. And again, with staff review and legal counsel review, it can be considered as a minor irregularity and waived. The bid price from Longo Incorporated was just under $300,000. And the funding source for this would be the Water Department General Fund. Sufficient funds do exist within this fund, and staff will be recommending a 10% change order allowance for a total authorization of just over $320,000. The recommendation before you this evening is to award the tank site piping modifications 2020 construction contract to Longo Incorporated in an amount of $292,290, plus a 10% change order allowance of $29,210 for a total authorization not to exceed $321,500. And I'm happy to answer any questions you might have.
All right, Brian, thank you. I'd like to open this item for public comment. I'm not seeing any additional QAs on this item. Shauna, do you have anything over on your end?
No, sir, I do not.
All right, thank you. I'd like to close public comment. And Tony, we'll start with you for any questions, comments on this item. Looks pretty straightforward. Thanks.
I'll move staff's recommendation.
Bob or Krista, any additional thoughts?
No, I agree. It looks obviously it's a thing that needs to happen. Nothing like having your water turned off. So let's avoid that and do these modifications. And thank you, Brian. You've just been nonstop tonight. It's the Brian show. So thank you for all your hard work for us.
All right. Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Thanks, Bob. Okay, we have a motion and a second. Shauna, could we have a roll call, please?
Yes, thank you. Director Laliotis,
Yes.
Director Ellis,
Yes.
Vice President Finn,
Yes.
President Bender.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. All right, we have, let's see. You know, I got a question. Steve, can I run and go get a glass of water? I ran out of water. The sun was beating down in my office here. So I'd like to just run and get a glass of water real quick before we
Mr. President, you may do that.
All right. Thank you. So let's take a short, just grab a water if you want to, and then we'll dive into workshop item 15. Stand by. All right. Thank you. I see Bob and Krista. Yeah, I don't see Tony yet. Tony, if you're out there. Hey, there you are. Great. Okay, we're all here. Let's dive into item number 15, review the proposed water utility 10-year capital improvement plan. Brian, you're up again. Wow.
This is the last one you'll hear from me this evening. I promise you that. Thank you, President Bender, members of the board. This is a workshop item, number 15. In a few moments, I'm going to introduce a couple of engineering consultants from Far West Engineering, Matt Schultz and Matt and Matt. So we have two Matts with us this evening. I'm going to do a brief introduction and a little bit of background as to why we're having this workshop and why the district is proposing this process. And then I will hand it over to Far West Engineering to do a presentation on the actual CIP technical memorandum. So let's get into this. So a little bit of background, the district's potable water system is relatively complex. For as small as we are, we have a lot of bang for our buck here in terms of different types of zones, 46 pressure zones, 11 active and 3 inactive potable water wells, 3 active non-potable non-potable wells utilized for irrigation and construction water. And then we also have 32 storage tanks distributed across the system, 25 pump stations, more than 220 miles of pipeline ranging in size from 2 to 24 inches in diameter, and 40 different pressure and pump control valves. As we mentioned in the earlier item, a significant portion of the district's potable water system was constructed between 1965 and 1975. These include the subdivisions we're all familiar with, Glenshire, Sierra Meadows, Ponderosa Palisades, Prosser Lakeview, and Tahoe Donner. The district has made, over the course of the last 10, 12, 15 years, significant investments into pipeline and pump station replacement projects. These were in large part driven by reducing water loss, leaks, and aging pump stations. There are still a significant remaining portion of this system's infrastructure that is approaching or has exceeded its useful life. The district's water utility has 2 primary revenue sources available to fund construction of water system infrastructure and facilities. The first one is facility fees. You may have heard of these in your interactions here with the district. Facility fees are designed to pay for growth. They're paid by property owners and developers when new connections are made to the water system. These fund expansion or growth of our system demand and system needs. The second revenue source is water rates. We're all familiar with that as ratepayers. These are the funds that are utilized for ongoing system maintenance and replacement of existing facilities upon reaching the end of their useful life. So the water rates are specifically allocated for these activities. During the preparation of the district's fiscal year 20 and 21 budget, the cycle we're currently in, it was determined that additional rate funding would be necessary to cover the costs associated with these additional maintenance and replacement of existing water infrastructures. Some additional factors are also contributing to this need for water system improvements. I mentioned earlier the State Water Resources Control Board water loss performance standards forthcoming. That'll be here this summer. Some of the provisions and compliance requirements are going to require that the district make some investment and construction of new monitoring systems and reduce water loss. We will get into, Far West will talk about some of the new coming public safety power shutoffs known as PSPS. And then the district, as a Nevada NV Energy transmission system, NV Energy has the public safety outage management system. Another item that we originally intended on including in this CIP was a time of use electric rate. How could the district's water utility utilize that? Unfortunately, the time of use electric rate study on the electric for the electric utility has been postponed. So we won't have that data to include in this current CIP. but it's something that we can consider in the future. The district has retained HDR, we are all familiar with, to conduct an updated water rate study in 2020. That is underway. We are doing the data collection for that, and we'll have some workshops in the coming months over the summer. And a necessary data input in order to really get an accurate rate study is to use this capital improvement plan that we're about to present to you as consideration for rate-funded projects. Historically, the district has done their own CIP internally, but we've identified a benefit at this point, considering the rate study and the need to update some of the construction costs to utilize the resources of a third-party CIP consultant. So back in October of last year, we publicly advertised a request for proposals for this CIP. It included the following task here, and Far West will go into those in more detail. And at this point, I would like to hand this over. I'm going to unshare my screen here and hand this over to Matt with Far West Engineering, who has been working and collaborating with staff here at the district in developing this technical memorandum. Matt, welcome to the Truckee Donner PUD board meeting.
Thank you very much, Brian, President Bender, board. We really appreciate the time and opportunity here. Again, my name is Matt Van Dyne with Far West Engineering, and over here with me is Matt Schultz, who's a senior engineer with us. We assembled this tech memo for you. So in essence of time, we'll quickly work through this. Be happy to answer any questions on the back end. I do want to ask quickly, just to ensure that everyone can see my screen with the PowerPoint presentation. Okay.
Yep, good, thank you.
All right, well, we'll get started here and be efficient as we can and save some time. So as Brian mentioned, we submitted a RFP to aid the district in preparing and updating their capital improvement plan. So we're very excited to work on that with you. So quick introduction, you got a little introduction already, but what were the efforts that we completed? Well, we mainly looked at identifying regulatory impacts and looking over about a 10-year span of what could we foresee coming. We also performed a power outage analysis. So with the outage mandates that are coming and being implemented by Nevada Energy, we wanted to look and see if the district completely lost power, how does that impact supplying water to its distribution system and its customers? We would take that information and update the capital improvement plan, and then understand financial and timing impacts of capital projects. So why is that needed? As we mentioned, that's to provide a detailed update to the CIP and the water system needs for the next 10 years, so you can then provide accurate information for rate setting needs. So regulatory impacts, we reviewed current and anticipated over the next 10 years regulatory impacts to the district from local water, state water, federal water, and also power supply purveyors. Reached out to all those parties and collected as much information as they saw fit at this time. Power outage, or supply outage, excuse me. Again, looking at impacts from power utility transmission and distribution with these outages during an extreme fire risk. Again, how does that impact the district? And we focus more on the ability to serve its customers during a 7-day power outage. So water system needs. Obviously, we're supplying a life supply of water to all the customers, fire flow needs. So it's a very important infrastructure that we need to ensure that we're able to operate and not have any outages. So we reviewed the water system demand of the entire district. And with that, we were understanding a range of conditions. As everyone I'm sure understands, during winter months, there's what we refer to as a winter usage condition. That's going to be your lowest system demand. There's indoor water use, no irrigation. So every individual water bill as homeowners, no matter where we live, we know we have lower water bills during the winter than we do in the summer. The maximum day demand would be peak usage conditions, and that would be in the summer. District has identified July 4th weekend as being that maximum day demand over the past few years. And obviously we have heavy irrigation from homeowners all the way up to the golf courses. We did take another look at a third option at a water conservation. Now the district has a 5-stage restriction mandate that it can implement to its customers. So we took a look at a middle of the road stage 3 restriction, which targets a 30% reduction in usage. So we took that 30% reduction off the maximum day demand to see another point on that sliding scale for this analysis. So looking at the infrastructure, if power goes out, how do we get water? If there is no power and no backup power, then we're reliant on the existing storage tanks. As we all know, these storage tanks receive and store the water from the wells and supply the distribution system, i.e. your customers. So an overview, you have 31 existing storage tanks. I know in the previous presentation from staff, there was 32 tanks. We did not identify your elevated storage tank as this is planned to be demolished in the upcoming years. With storage tanks, there's obviously a fixed volume that's associated to each tank for consumption. Any additional volume that is required by the distribution system would then have to be produced by wells and the booster pumps if the tanks can't supply enough water over that 7-day outage. So what we did is looking at each of these 3 usage conditions of the winter day, your lowest system need, stage 3 restrictions, and a maximum day demand of your 31 tanks. In green are what are tanks capable of providing 7 days worth of volume to its tank zone within the tank volume it can store. In the red are tanks that are incapable of providing the 7-day storage. So obviously we can see that the existing tanks are not sized large enough, not saying they're inadequate because we're looking at these worst case scenarios of a power outage. But we can see that tanks alone we cannot rely on to supply the full demand over a power outage. Now what does that mean? We need to get water back up to the tanks. So first it comes from your production wells. These wells are going to be required to supplement that additional demand requirement. So a quick overview, you have 11 existing wells within the district. 2 of those wells have existing standby power to operate them in a power outage. And those are the airport well and the Prosser Village well. So we looked at, again, these 3 conditions, winter day, stage 3 restriction, and maximum day demand, and what is the additional required volume demand to the district that the tanks cannot supply. So the blue color is the airport well, green is the Prosser Village well. So looking, those have existing backup power, so those are obviously the first ones we're going to rely upon. During the winter day demand, in excess of what the storage tanks can hold, the distribution system needs an additional 1.25 million gallons per day. Now we can see the production of airport and Prosser Village exceed that requirement. So during the winter day demand, if we lose all power, we have 2 backup generators at these 2 wells, plus the storage in all the tanks, we can survive the 7-day outage. Now that's our best case as far as water demand needs is in the winter. We know we can't rely on that all year. So again, we looked at a stage 3 restriction. Again, airport, Prosser Village. We now see that required additional demand is 4.04 million gallons per day. So the 2 existing wells that have the backup power cannot supply that supplemental volume to the system. So now we need to look at what additional wells do we need to get backup power to help provide that. The next well we identified and staff had identified as well is the Martis Valley #1 well, which is a large producing well at 2.23 million gallons per day. The addition of that well now accounts for the supplemental volume of water that needs to be produced under a stage 3 restriction. Looking at worst case, your maximum day demands, your peak holiday, and you want to keep everything going, wheels turning, firing on 8 cylinders, whatever analogy you want to use, but seeing no disruption to your system. You would need to add an additional backup generator to a well to produce the required 6.28 million gallons per day of additional demand. So now we have the water getting produced. We need to get it to the tanks. Now we need to look at the booster stations. So these booster stations, they're providing additional energy to get that water to those higher elevations and store them at the tanks. You have 25 existing booster pump stations. Of those 25, 18 have existing standby power generators. So now we did an analysis looking at the flow characteristics from wells to tanks so that we can get enough water to each tank to then feed each tank zone. So identifying the priority booster stations, if you will. So in the blue identifies the 18 booster stations that currently have existing generators. Looking at that priority path, we identified 5 additional booster pump stations that need to have backup power that don't currently to get water to all storage tanks to keep the system operational. 2 booster stations do not require a backup generator, and that is because those are redundant pump stations pumping into the same zones as other booster stations that do have backup power. We do not need to get generators on every single booster station. So where do we go from here? What do we know now? We collected a lot of system analysis information from performing these activities. Now we understand regulatory impacts that are upcoming. Improvements have been identified. And what do we do with it? So we take this information and we're going to update the CIP. And to update that, we're going to look in detail of cost estimating and prioritization of these projects to then outline the next 10 years of where the district should be going and what is the best return and benefit of that. And then we'll consider the rate setting to fund for these construction projects. Cost estimating, Far West teams with a third-party cost estimator. Pre-Construction Services Group is the name of the company. Fantastic individual by the name of John Collins. Spent his whole career with large construction projects doing estimating, knows everybody in the region. So he has what's called a heavy civil cost estimating program. And that is what contractors of the likes of Granite Construction, Q&D Construction, Sierra Nevada Construction, all these very large outfits utilize. And he built individual cost estimates for every project identified in the CIP. These individual cost estimates are obviously required for the planning and rate setting. Developing these costs, we utilize previous unit pricings of district projects. We did a strong comparison to neighboring jurisdictions of the Sierra front and the Tahoe region. And then we did a cost factor analysis. That cost factor analysis, it's hard to see here, but if you read the tech memo or saw in the laundry list of appendices, we have all these outputs. And in these outputs and cost estimating, it drills all the way down to every single material, every labor class, every piece of equipment required to do a job. So the takeoffs are exactly like a contractor would do. So we are down to that level of cost estimating for these projects. So the capital improvement plan, developing that, we started with the existing CIP projects that were not completed from the past list. We then identified projects resulting from regulatory and power outage analysis, the reduction of water loss, as Brian mentioned, the water loss performance standards that are upcoming, and backup power, and that is hinged on the public safety outage management program that NV Energy is now implementing. We also identified additional projects directed by staff. Brian mentioned a few of these. You just awarded a couple contracts for some of these improvements, but mainly it's looking at storage tank rehabilitations, the coating structural improvements, mechanical replacements of booster stations and wells, and then even looking at the whole facility replacement based on useful life. Growth-related projects were not included, so these are all going to be operation and maintenance based on rates. So useful life, we've mentioned that a couple times. A large portion of the district's water infrastructure has aged. Brian touched on that in his last presentation. So the useful life of these main components that we've been identifying through this study are water storage tanks. 24 of the 31 were built pre-1990. And we bring that to attention because about 1990 is when seismic rehabilitation requirements to old and seismic requirements and code standards were implemented. So we can see that the vast majority of the existing tanks do not meet current seismic codes. Structure of a tank, the steel nature of it, usually get about 75 years is a good planning number. The coating of a tank, you're going to replace quite a bit sooner, 20, 25 years, depending on maintenance. Wells and booster pump stations, the facilities of them, vaults, buildings, can last you 50 plus years in a planning sense. And the mechanical equipment, pumps, motors, about 15 to 20 years, and you're going to be looking at replacing those. So when we look at budgeting, we now have good, confident numbers to move forward with. And we'll take a look at how all these projects play in year by year. We, as I mentioned, are addressing operation and maintenance needs only with the study. The district initially had an annual budget target of $2.25 million. After we've updated the CIP and allocated the projects over this 10-year span, we've identified an annual budget equivalent of about $7 million. Now, that's an annual equivalent, so we all know that years fluctuate. So depending on how many projects you want to take on or timing of them, it could range. It could be $1 million one year and 10 million another. But now we know the cost of what these projects are. Budgeting summary, over the next 10 years of the CIP, we've grouped them just into light categories: the well improvements, pump station improvements, pipeline and ARV improvements, and replacements, and then tank improvements. So you can see a quick visual allocation that, for the most part, year by year, the district is looking to do waterline replacement projects. And that will greatly improve its system efficiency, and mainly in reference to the water loss performance standards that are going to be implemented. So conclusions, regulatory driven needs are yet to be determined, but we do know that with the power outage and the water loss performance standards. We need to focus on the strategic generator placement, water main replacements, and general maintenance of other key facilities. We'll look and consider the CIP needs to prioritize these projects. And then as the district is already underway, to perform a rate study to identify feasible rates to fund the final CIP. So our presentation allocates these projects and has spread them out equally over the next 10 years. But obviously that's not final. Staff, board will all make considerations to this, and working with HDR determine what is feasible for rates. And that's why we looked at that stage 3 reduction, because maybe we don't go all the way and hit that maximum day demand and address every single project. Maybe we find some middle ground, but that'll be good discussion for staff and the board to make for the district and its customers. So I'll hold my breath for a second here. I hopefully didn't go too quickly, but would be really happy to answer any questions or go back to anything to help out with this presentation.
So Director Bender, thank you, Matt. If the board would like to open this for questions for Matt and Far West or myself, I do have a couple slides, but they're conclusion slides that I can open up later. If you have any questions for Matt, this would probably be appropriate time.
Great. Thank you, Brian. Krista, you're on the top of my video list there. I can see.
I actually don't have questions on this part. Most of my questions are probably for Brian and for the rest of the board. So for the technical end of this study, I think I am as good as I can get with my technical background.
Thanks.
Yeah, I don't really have any questions. Pretty depressing. Wow. Okay. No questions for me though.
Thanks, Bob. Tony, do you have any questions for Matt?
No. No, I think Far West did a very thorough job in completing this CIP plan. It was well laid out, and the numbers are as solid as they're going to get. So thanks, Matt, and your team for putting all this together. I know you wish you could read the whole thing to us, but it's not in the cards tonight. But I want to just, along Krista's lines, this is, this needs to be looked at as a tool by the board for moving forward with our rate study. These are big numbers. I agree, Bob, but the reality is they're only as good as the supporting documents and the supporting information to justify what the expenses and costs are and how to prioritize them. And that's what this document does and will do for us moving forward as we begin to contemplate what these numbers mean to rates. So let's take this with with as much. This is going to be one of the biggest tools we will have moving forward in deciding and moving forward with a rate structure. So it is very important that it is done correctly. I believe it is. It's thorough and I think it will serve a significant purpose moving forward.
Great. Thanks, Tony. Yeah, I ditto everyone. Very thorough. Really appreciate everyone's effort in putting this together. It's nice to just really see that 10-year plan, big numbers, but it provides us a lot of information and to work with staff and team to prioritize and see what we can do, see what we can accomplish. So Matt, you did have a slide in there in the presentation, and maybe Brian, you have it in yours as well. But there was it was the graph 10 years of the right there. There we go. That one. I guess it's close to the meatloaf graph, but it's still very, very pretty good. It's just nice to see that, what the makeup is, what the costs are. You know, well improvements, pipeline, pump stations, and tanks. Great. Yeah, excellent presentation. So thanks very much. And then, Brian, where did you want to go from here again?
Again, thank you, Matt, for that. If you could unshare your screen, and then I'll share mine to do the closing slides.
Okay. And I would like to say thank you to staff and the board for allowing us to present. We enjoyed working with you, and any questions, follow up at any time. And as Director Leiliotis said, this is hopefully going to be a good tool for the district to use for all the future needs moving forward.
Great, thank you.
Thank you very much.
So the item this evening does not have a direct fiscal impact associated with it, but as Matt with Far West indicated, and we discussed earlier on, this proposed CIP plan will be utilized heavily in preparation for the district's upcoming water rate study. I would like to, the discussions you've already had with Matt, but also reemphasize that the need for the district as presented by the CIP to harden our resources in terms of power outages in the future, and the regulatory component that's still yet to be seen in terms of water loss performance standards. The initial preliminary water standards have been published. There's a lot of uncertainty, and really the uncertainties surrounded around districts across the state aren't real familiar with how those standards were calculated. That information is still being examined and requested by agencies statewide. We will be able to come to the board at a future date and really have a better idea on that. And then finally, one of the items that was within that scope of work originally was to do a time of use rate study or a case study for the water utility. That would include, you know, some provisions to increase storage in certain parts of the district so that the district could pump from our groundwater sources during certain times of day, store it for use at night, or vice versa. We look forward to doing that in the future, but in order to do that with any sort of accuracy, we really need to partner up with the electric utility and look at what those the details of those time of use rates, what that really looks like. And so that's something forthcoming. Wasn't unfortunately included in this scope of work, but we will look at it in the future. The recommendation this evening, this is a workshop item. You have done so already, but we're here for any additional questions and feedback from the board to staff. And thank you for your time this evening.
Great, thank you, Brian. I'd like to just open it up for public comment. Shauna, I'm not seeing anything in the Q&A regarding this item, this workshop item. Did you get any emails? Oh, all right. We'll close public comment. And Brian, thanks again. Really thorough. I had a question, and then the Zoom stuff. My mind goes blank too quickly.
Getting old, Jeff. Getting old.
I know. Too many gray hairs hiding in there on my head.
Can you make a comment? I just wanted to say that was an excellent presentation. I mean, it was very easy to follow and understand, and that was one of the best vendor presentations I've seen while I've been on the board.
Thank you, Director Ellis. The staff echoes your sentiments. Matt and the team at Far West have done a fantastic job.
Thank you very much.
Great. All right. Krista, any additional thoughts or comments here?
Yeah, of course. So Brian actually answered my very first one, which was, is there such a thing as time of use rates for the water side? And so he did just give us a little bit of staff thought on that, because I think that might be an important tool. This is really rich, this capital improvement plan for 10 years. It really opens up a lot of terrain with the power, public safety power shutoffs. You know, what kind of, again, hardening of the system, and I use the word resilience a lot. I think it's pretty much this exact same concept. You know, obviously keeping our water flowing during a power shutoff, a public safety power shutoff of unknown duration, is of paramount importance and also an extreme challenge. And one of the things that that study did not encompass is kind of more our district's policies and how we communicate with our ratepayers. Like, if this is going to happen, how much lead time do we have, and how much of that time, you know, will the customer have? Obviously, we're going to be informed, hopefully, first from Nevada Energy, you know, before the power just goes off, but there's no guarantee about that, I imagine. And, you know, like, hey, fill up your bathtub with water, for example. You know, your power is going to be shut off for an unknown period of time, which means eventually we're going to run out of water. That's a terrible thing, especially now with COVID. We're supposed to be washing our hands every 10 minutes. So I think that's a really something we're really going to have to wrap our minds around. And how are we going to accomplish these things? How proactive can we be with that? I think we really have to focus, again, the same low-hanging fruit as conservation. You know, if we use less water, we have to pump less water. We have to store less water. So how do we get that really drilled into our customers, and what sorts of programs do we have to help them conserve water? You know, I know that most of us, you know, once I set my timer on my irrigation, that's like kind of all the water conservation that I do. I'm sure there's got to be more out there. And I also want to, and this is definitely a board conversation, I want to make sure that resilience and sustainability are baked into every capital improvement project that we embark upon. Therefore, what would those be? You know, like what sort of standards should we impose upon ourselves for our capital improvement projects regarding conservation, renewable energy, resilience? We don't really have a standard. You know, we don't have a set of policies addressing that. And for example, the town of Truckee, they passed the 100% renewables resolution. And then the very first project, it was a building that didn't even exist. It was just a lot, and they were going to build a courtyard warehousing facility, and they had it piped for natural gas. This is like literally a week after they passed the 100% renewables, and there was a bit of an uproar. They're like, hey, you guys just passed this, and the very first project that you are embarking upon is not fitting into what you said you were going to do. So just stuff like that. I would like us as a board to sort of codify what our standards are, and then, you know, do our best to stick with them. But I know that's a deep conversation. It's way beyond tonight's workshop, but this capital improvement plan really, to me, brought a light onto the real depth of this subject. So I know I talked for a long time. So if anybody has questions for me about these sorts of ideas that I'm thinking about, it's out there. Think about it. Thank you. I think that's everything that I had. I'm sure if I come up with more, I'll pipe up. Thank you.
Absolutely. All right. Thank you, Krista. Yeah, excellent tool in many ways. The CIP, as we're discovering. Where were we? Bob, have you commented? Bob, have you said anything on this one yet? No.
Made a comment. I'm all done. I'm done.
Oh, okay, great. All right. Tony, anything else?
No, I just want to acknowledge Krista's comments. I hear you. And there may be some opportunities within this plan, and what the purpose and the focus of this plan is on to help shape the future as far as how these things go. But there are some very mechanical things in here that are leaning towards basic necessity. But I do see some opportunity, and I think, as a board, we can definitely work with staff to figure out where those opportunities exist and how they can benefit this plan and the district moving forward.
Good. Thanks, Tony. Yeah, I see that it'll help prioritize. We do need to do that. There isn't, Bob, like you said, 7 million right now allocated every year. So we do have to prioritize, and incorporating resilience, sustainability, etc. And Brian, I'm sure you have like some must-do projects as well, just like we approved tonight, that we're going to have to use to prioritize and see what that rate study looks like. Because my gut feeling, the rate study is going to say, hey, we can't do all of this, so we really do have to start thinking about prioritization. So, and I always was focused on the pipeline replacement, so it's always good to see that. That's a big one. When pipes leak and create natural springs in Tahoe Donner that are from a leaky pipe that eventually gets fixed, it's nice. So that saves a lot of water. Landscape irrigation, yes, I just turned mine on, and looking at that water bill start to go up. So big things to talk about. Excellent tool. Really appreciate it. Brian, you mentioned something that was really cool that I finally remembered what it was, is the pumping during the day, and storing that water. And that's a really key energy use. The largest customer of the PUD is the water district for pumping. And when you have large amounts of solar energy that we're going to be buying into here in the next few years, that peaks during the day when the sun is shining. So this is one enormous tool I see us as a district kind of utilizing, pumping during the day to use that solar energy that's generated if there's any peaks or excess, etc. So something to throw in the mix and think about. That was a huge opportunity that I saw there to utilize in the future and think about. So yeah, agreed. Great comments, questions. Really appreciate it. So it's just nice to have this updated this document here, and will be an excellent tool for us, but some challenging times or just a challenge to prioritize everything. So really appreciate it. Thanks again. Any other last thoughts?
That was perfect, Jeff. That's exactly the sort of thing that I feel like this whole plan, when we have it all in front of us, those kinds of ideas are win-win-win. They save our customers, they save everybody money, they get the water pumped, and it's a really resilient, renewable resource. So thank you for noting that, Brian. Thank you for pointing it out. So all of those things, those are exactly the sorts of ideas that I appreciate. So thank you.
Excellent. Great. I think that's it. I'm going to pull back to the agenda. So thanks, Brian. And that wraps it up for item 15. And we've got 16, review of the district's COVID-19 relief efforts. And we have Stephen. Hey, you must be presenting this.
Yes. Good evening, President Bender, members of the board. I am not Brian Wright. but I'll try to do a good job if I can. All right, just want to confirm you can see my screen. Great, thank you. So this is a review of the district's COVID-19 relief efforts. The district has been responding to the COVID-19 crisis. Staff, board, our customers, the community. Our focus has been on mission critical work and employee safety, maintaining critical energy and water services to the community, practicing physical distancing, hygiene, and personal responsibility, implementing operational changes, working at home and digitally, prioritizing work, closing the district's office to the public while we continue to offer services, and conducting online board meetings. Do want to commend the board for the steps that you've taken to continue governance and operations of the district. You did move to the online meetings per the state requirements, as we're experiencing right now. Public can observe meetings via streaming video or participate via Zoom. There's multiple ways to make public comment, and we are improving the process of doing these virtual board meetings as we gain experience. And thanks to the work that's been done over the previous years, we've positioned the district to respond to emergencies. That's the dedicated and experienced staff, adequate resources and support, and financial resources in contingencies. So I'm going to move on to helping those in need. And with regards to disconnects for non-payment, they were suspended early in the COVID crisis. For late penalties and interest, they are being waived for all customers, that's residential and business. And we continue to work individually with customers who are having trouble paying their bills like we did previously to try in a very one-on-one way, figure out if there's solutions that we can put in place to help them. And then there's the COVID-19 Customer Relief Program that was approved by the board at the April 15th meeting. And I'll go into that a little bit. So Customer Relief Program, it expands temporarily the district's existing payment assistance program in a meaningful and immediate way, and it's targeted at primary residential customers. It temporarily increased the payment assistance to 2 months bill credit. So of the highest bill in the last 12 months, they double that and it gets put out a credit on their bill. It applies to customers who have filed for state or federal unemployment and those with other documented loss of 25% of income. Leverages existing program and our partner, our contractor, Sierra Community House capacity. The temporary program continues to defer the residential energy survey requirement, but our hope is to come in and do that when COVID permits it, because that really gives ongoing save energy, water, and money benefits that are important going forward. Program remains in effect for 30 days after California or locally has ended the stay-at-home orders or until the reallocated funds are expended. And the board did reallocate $275,000 to the program for a total budget of $330,000, and that could serve approximately 550 primary residential customers in need, which represents about 15% of that customer class. So since April 15th, the district and Sierra Community House, have aggressively promoted the temporary relief program, did KTKE interviews and spots, a targeted social media campaign, press release, traditional media and outreach, website, and then partnering with local partners like the town of Truckee and Truckee Chamber of Commerce that have significant outreach and who have been helping promote our program through their communication channels. And then the district and Sierra Community House are ramping up capacity to process a dramatic increase in customer participation. We have processed more applications since board action a month ago than we did in the previous year, for example. So a little bit of analysis and statistics on the COVID-19 Customer Relief Program results. We have processed over 120 applications. We believe there's about 100 in the queue at Sierra Community House. They're indicating they're getting 8 to 10 calls per day. Not all of those translate into, processed applications, but that's what they're seeing. And then we looked a little at who's been participating. 95% of the applicants are citing the loss of 25% of income. 60% approximately have filed for unemployment, and about 40% have cited the loss of 25% of income. About 5% of the applicants are primary residential customers who are also local business owners and are citing the loss of business income that then qualifies them for the credit on their primary residential account. We estimate about a third of the reallocated budget has been committed to date. And the weekly run rate is being impacted by Sierra Community House capacity and just the process of ramping up a program. So they are increasing staffing, and we're continuing to track that. So the duration of the temporary relief program, it remains in effect, as I said before, for 30 days after California or locally has ended the stay-at-home orders, or until the reallocated funds are expended. We've only seen a partial lifting of the restrictions to date, and the duration of the restrictions and long-term economic impact remain unknown. So staff is recommending that we continue with the program for now, but that we track the level of participation and the budget expenditures and keep track of that. I want to shift a little bit to our district business customers who are suffering a hardship from the COVID-19 crisis, and the board did ask that we, look to see what we could do for them. As I said previously, we are waiving all late penalties and interest, and we are working individually with customers to try to help them and come up with a plan. We did investigate potential business relief programs, looked at a bunch of sister utilities, worked through NCPA and CMUA, our joint action groups in California. And we, looked at the constraints of our funding sources and the budget. We're also, constantly trying to understand the business relief programs that are being offered at the federal, state, and local level. So CARES and the stimulus, some state programs, and then the excellent work being done by the chamber on some small business relief assistance. And we're trying to understand, what that covers and what shortfalls might exist. To date, we have not found a compelling program that makes sense for us yet. And we've seen almost no programs for the business level by any of our sister utilities. But there's an understanding that this is a need, and we will continue to investigate going forward. In terms of fiscal impact, the district's temporary COVID-19 customer relief program reallocated $275,000 for a total almost $330,000. Again, we have committed about a third of those funds to date. We are not charging staff time to the program to try to stretch the dollars as far as we can, and sufficient funds do exist for this reallocation. And the recommendations to provide feedback and direction, and I'd be happy to answer any questions at this time.
Great, thank you, Stephen. All right, I'm not seeing any Q&A, so we'll have opened and closed public comment regarding public comment on this one. Oh, Shauna.
There's no email, sir.
Got it. Thank you. Okay. Bob, you have the mute on. You are unmuted, so go ahead. Any input?
Very, very nice report by Stephen. Just want to say, I assume we'll be close to a board meeting if we need to reallocate some more funds. for this project, and hopefully he continues to work closely with our business partners in case they need some help. That's all I got.
Great. Thanks, Bob. Krista, do you have any comments, questions? You're on mute.
Sorry, I'm having, there we go.
There we go.
Problems. Yeah, thank you, Stephen, for the update. Tag teaming with Bob there. Do we have any thoughts on where we would reallocate more funds from? I don't.
We've been focusing within the immediate budget and within the public benefit funds that all our customers pay into and that are available for this. And that's where we've been making the reallocations and trying to figure out, you know, what we can execute, what's cost effective, and what would be meaningful for our customers.
Right, because I mean, it does seem like it's, well, it's filling a need if we've already gone through, you know, a third of the funds allocated in a pretty quick, you know, a month, you know, that this has been up. And I foresee it going away and coming back. You know, everybody's talking about the fall is going to be more intense again, and we're going to have to stay home after we open up in the summer. So I'm just trying to think a little bit ahead and how we can continue to fund this. And here's for our new treasurer, Mr. Salmon, the kind of ball of fishing wire I like to throw at staff. Do we, you know, is there an opportunity for other ratepayers in our district to contribute to people in need via their bill? For example, I participated in a number of programs. They're like, round your bill up and we use that money very specifically for this thing, you know, for supporting other customers in need. I don't know if it's legal. I don't know if it's, you know, it would obviously be a billing, maybe not a nightmare, but a thing, you know, but stuff like that. Is that a possibility or is it not? That's Steve Gross might have something to say about that too.
No, I believe it's a possibility, and staff has been talking about roundups because it's a pretty common practice in utility billing. And interestingly enough, a month before the COVID crisis hit, one of our mid-level staff came up with an idea on, you know, how could we get people to donate to bills so that that money could be made available. So your concept has been contemplated. We'll certainly continue to investigate it. The crisis and, you know, the scrambling we're doing, you know, put perhaps a little halt on that, but it's an idea that we are looking at.
Right on, great. It's just, yeah, I'm just, whatever, throwing stuff at the wall because I just foresee this being an ongoing situation, and obviously we don't have, our resources are finite. I want to stretch them or renew them in whatever way that we can. So that's all of my comments. Thank you, Stephen.
Great, thanks, Krista. Steve Gross, I saw some nods, so I'm assuming those things are legal.
Yes, I concur with Stephen. They are legal. A roundup is a voluntary payment. It's a voluntary contribution. So we're certainly allowed to ask for it. Customers are certainly allowed to provide for it. And then once we have those sorts of funds, we treat them with the same fiduciary type duty and trust of public funds that we treat all our other funds with, and treat them very carefully. But the short answer is yes. That kind of a program would be lawful for us to implement.
Great. Thank you. Tony.
No, great presentation. I'm happy to see that the program is being widely utilized. And I do want to comment that Tahoe City PUD did take action recently to extend rate relief to the commercial customers under their sewer rates. So it is possible, but I will caution that the types of funding available to do that are different. in Tahoe City than they are in Truckee. So it's not a direct correlation to say that, but there are other utilities, at least I know of one that is focusing more on the commercial core than the basic residential group of customers. But no, I support continuing to move forward, and I definitely am encouraged to see all the participation, and appreciate staff tracking all the time and the statistics here, and hopefully we'll continue to get updates and perhaps be put in a position to continue this if needed. So thank you.
Thanks, Tony. Yeah, I'd like to ditto everybody's comments. Great update. The program's working. People are calling in, utilizing it. There's funding there. So just carry on, keep us updated. Sounds like you're really turning over stones, thinking of things in case it does ramp up or extend. So a lot of unknowns in the future. So staff and Stephen, thank you for digging in and keeping after the program, and I'm all for continuing it, and thank you.
Welcome.
All right. So that's it for our workshops. Now we have a couple of routine business items. We have the treasurer's report, approval of the treasurer's report of fund balances as of the month ended March 31st. Is there a motion for that?
I'll move to approve the treasurer's report of fund balances for the month ended March 2020.
I'll second.
Shauna, could we have roll call, please?
Absolutely. Director Laliotis?
Yes.
Director Ellis?
Yes.
Vice President Finn?
Yes.
President Bender?
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, and this is my favorite part. Is there a motion to approve the disbursements that have already been paid?
I move to pay the bills.
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second. Shauna, roll call, please.
Thank you. Director Laliotis?
Yes.
Director Ellis?
Yes.
Vice President Finn?
Yes.
President Bender?
Yes.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. And I'm scrolling through. Oh, we have some minutes. Minutes for the approval of meeting minutes for May 6th.
Is there any corrections?
You know, Bob, it was a perfect meeting. So
Thank you, Mr. President.
Okay, President.
Is there a motion to approve the perfect meeting minutes?
I'll move to approve the minutes of May 6, 2020.
I'll second. So Shauna, roll call, please.
Thank you, Director Laliotis.
Yes.
Director Ellis?
Yes.
Vice President Finn?
Yes.
President Bender?
Yes.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Okay, now I'm going to take me back to the second page of the agenda. All right, we have some closed session items coming up. I'll read those in a moment. We will be taking a short break prior to going into closed session for agua, bathroom, etc. And then we'll have another Zoom meeting to click into that Ian has provided for us. So we have two items tonight. Item number 19, closed session pursuant to Government Code Section 54957.6, conference with labor negotiators, agency designated representatives, myself, President Jeff Bender, and Director Tony Laliotis for the unrepresented employee general manager. And item 20, closed session pursuant to Government Code Section 54957, public employee performance evaluation, general manager's performance plan review. So with that, we'll take a break. Everyone, thank you very much.
And we will see you all at the next meeting.
Okay, so close out of this one, right?
We'll close this one out here on Zoom, and we'll go to the second meeting, and then we'll come back to this one for open session.
Got it. Thanks, Michael. See everyone on the other side.